Welcome back to the Benefit Whisper, the podcast where we break the silence on what's really happening in healthcare benefits and drug spending. I'm Ralph Weber, and today we're diving into the big elephants in the room, prescription drug costs. Why does U.S. spend more than nearly every country on earth on healthcare? And how did the state of New Jersey save 25 million, 100 million, maybe even more? And then wait until you hear the baking soda story, how that can inflate the cost of drugs. So our guest today is Benjamin Jolley, somebody who's out there helping to rewrite the rules on pharmacy benefits. So let's dive in. I have with me today my guest, Benjamin Jolley. Benjamin, happy to have you today.
Thanks, Ralph. Great to be here.
Excellent. So you have quite a story. Why don't you give us the landscape? Why are prescription costs so out of control in the U.S.?
Yeah, so I think the long story short is the people that we entrust to bring down the cost of drugs are corrupt. That's the short version. I mean, you have the largest pharmacy benefit managers in the country make money not from lowering prescription drug costs per se, but more often by increasing them. That happens in the form of the largest pharmacy benefit managers own pharmacies. And so they make money by selling drugs at higher prices than they buy them at, right? That's how a pharmacy makes money. And so that's one part. Another is the way that we negotiate down, especially brand name drug prices in the form of rebates, is a rather perverse system and allows us to hide money from employers, from beneficiaries by saying, in essence, saying to a drug manufacturer, that's an awfully nice drug you've got there. It'd be a shame if no one could buy it. I'm going to need a cut, right? Like that is in effect what a rebate is. And like, to me, the existence of, say, Zinc or Ascent, these group purchasing organizations that pharmacy benefit managers use to negotiate these rebates, really appears to just be a scheme to hide money from employers. That's at least the way that it looks from the outside. I don't know
Okay.
whether they're actually doing anything bona fide good inside, but it sure seems like just a money laundering scheme from the outside.
Absolutely crazy. Doesn't even, certainly it lacks accountability, but what happened to transparency?
Right, for sure. I mean, like, if you're running an employee benefit plan, you are required under the law to like not make payments unless you are sure they are reasonable. And so if someone is hiding money from you, you cannot know that they're reasonable payments, right?
Of course not. And when you say when you are running an employee benefits plan, who is the you? Is that Blue Cross? Is it the employer? Is it who's the
Whoever's
person
on the
that's
plan documents as the plan administrator. So that's
okay?
oftentimes the CFO of the company. That's often that might be the benefits administrator, like it might be someone who's in charge of HR, but it might be the employer itself. I mean, in many cases, the employer as the plan sponsor is liable to the plan for losses from bad plan management.
Okay. So just to give some background here for the listeners, we're talking about self-funded plans governed under ERISA by and overseen by the Department of Labor. We're not talking about fully insured plans. We're talking about self-insured plans. And in those plans where an CHRO, CFO, CEO, whoever, chief of procurement signs the plan document, they can be held personally liable if they have not vetted the PBM, if they're not sure that the payments are reasonable.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So can you give me some examples or just even one example of where a drug cost is higher than what the employer's charged?
Sure. I mean, this kind of thing happens all the time. This tactic is generally called spread pricing, wherein and it's not necessarily per se a prohibited act, but it's a very questionable method of compensating a pharmacy benefit manager. What might happen here is a pharmacy benefit manager might agree with a plan sponsor that this is the prices that will be paid for this list of drugs. And so they'll have just a list of prices for a list of drugs. But then the pharmacy benefit manager may have a different list of prices for which they pay pharmacies. So let's say I dispense a medication like Cymbalta generic, duloxetine, at the pharmacy where I work. I might be paid by a pharmacy benefit manager $30-$40 for that medicine. Under my contract with that pharmacy benefit manager, it's none of my business whether or not um, that $30 or $40 is the same price that is then charged to the employer. The PBM might charge the employer $50, $100, maybe even $200 for that same medicine, and pocket the difference between what they paid me, the say $40, and what they charge the employer, say $50. But the differences can be very different depending on the plan, and there can be very extreme cases. One example that I distinctly recall was a patient went to their pharmacy, I believe in California, and received a fancy version of a very common diabetes medicine called metformin. This version of metformin bears a incredibly high average wholesale price, something like what immediate release metformin has. And the pharmacy received a payment of $50 from the patient as their copayment, plus $140, I believe, from the plan, which this already sounds like a lot of money for metformin, right?
Uh-huh.
But the plan in question was Anthem, and the PBM in question was CVS Caremark. So the pharmacy received $140 from CVS Caremark, but this prescription was filled 2 days after the member's coverage was supposed to have been terminated.
Okay.
So CVS Caremark duly paid they hadn't properly terminated the patient's coverage under the plan yet.
Uh-huh.
And this may have been a fully insured plan. Anyway, so CVS Caremark had paid the pharmacy, the patient had paid their copayment, and then CVS Caremark had billed Anthem. Then Anthem, several months later, went to the patient and said, "Hey, you need to make us whole for what we paid CVS Caremark for this medicine." And they demanded a payment of $1,818.65, if I remember the numbers
Wow.
right.
$1,800.
Right, and the
Okay.
pharmacy received a payment of $140.
Okay. So what happened to the other $1,400?
It went to CVS Caremark as spread.
Wow. So that's what spread pricing is.
Right. And when you do the math on what happened there, the payment from Anthem to CVS Caremark was exactly 25% of the average wholesale price, minus the $50 copayment that the member paid. And so the patient goes to the pharmacy very upset, like, what kind of snake oil are you selling that
Wow.
you're billing me $2,000 for metformin, in effect? And the pharmacy's like, "Well, here's my computer. I got paid $140 for this. I don't know where this $1,800 is coming from." Anyway, so that was one of the starkest examples of spread pricing that I've ever seen in my life. I have the screenshots on my phone of what the patient saw on the demand letter from Anthem, what the pharmacy showed on their screen as the payment. Like, it is wild. In some cases, that kind of extreme thing can happen. That's just an example of spread pricing, and the
Right.
markups
Right.
can be very large.
Very concerning. Very concerning. Now, Benjamin, you told me before we started that you are an actual pharmacist. As a matter of fact, you operate the third oldest pharmacy in Salt Lake City. Is that correct?
In Utah, yeah.
In
I think
Utah.
we're the
Wow.
oldest
In the
in
whole
Salt Lake
state.
City. Yeah,
Wow. That's amazing. So you're on the front lines every single day, and your pharmacy is obviously not a big chain store.
right.
Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
We have one location. We're affiliated in some form or fashion, but not really, with 3 other pharmacies. But I mean, I don't think that anyone would call a single pharmacy a large chain, and even 4 pharmacies, I don't think you would consider to be a large chain.
Sure. Right. Wow. So what you're telling me, Benjamin, is very, very concerning. Why aren't people speaking out? Why aren't the states or the federal government doing something? Or are they?
It depends. Some people are doing something about all of this. Some are not. You mentioned, why don't people speak out about this? Well, in part because sometimes the contracts that pharmacies have with pharmacy benefit managers can bind the signatory to explicitly not speak out and not say nasty things about their relationship, a non-disparagement clause in the contract. And I mean, to me, the concept that you would need a non-disparagement clause in your contract says something like, and this is a standard adhesion contract where it's like, these are the terms, you can accept them or not. If you need a non-disparagement clause in your contract, maybe you should be looking yourself in the mirror.
Right. Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
so that's one reason people don't speak out. Another is just like the weaponization of methods to control plan spend by by third-party administrators. Pharmacy owners and operators receive on the regular audits of their dispensing to say, hey, you said you dispensed this much medicine to this person. Please give us documentation, show us the prescription, show us that you actually bought the drug, show us a signature that the patient actually picked it up, so on and so forth. But this kind of thing can be weaponized by a administrator to punish people that speak out. I mean, just as a brief for example, and also to just punish people that aren't as politically powerful. As a for example, in Mississippi, the Board of Pharmacy audited United Healthcare's PBM OptumRx and asked them to turn over documents of all of the pharmacy audits that they performed over the last year. And they overwhelmingly audited small business pharmacies, and not large chains, and not at all their own pharmacy.
Really? Not at all.
Right.
As in zero.
Right. So they
Wow.
audited small business pharmacies, like 70% of the audits they performed. 30% were large chain pharmacies, and the were chain pharmacies, not even just
Right.
large chains necessarily. And 0 were of the pharmacies that they owned and operated.
Amazing. And that's probably all in the contract wording, the right to audit clause. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, like they have a right to audit, and that's fine. But like it's even legally mandated. I have no concerns about the concept that pharmacists should be audited. There
Sure.
exist pharmacies that are literally owned by the mafia. Like this kind, like the potential for fraud in the claim adjudication system is quite rife, and so like there is a necessity to audit to make sure that like the people involved in the process are being honest. What's concerning is when that process is disproportionately targeted at a class of people who are not as politically connected, who are not as able to fight back with lawyers and so forth. And so anyway, like a few years ago, I wrote an article on my blog criticizing a large PBM, and I said some mean things about some press releases they released. And the next week, I received a fraud, waste, and abuse investigation audit from that same pharmacy benefit manager, which took me a month to resolve, and they found no evidence of fraud, waste, or abuse. My theory there is that I said bad things about their PR campaign, casting doubt on their narrative, and some upset executive filed a complaint to their fraud, waste, and abuse tip line.
Wow.
Right,
Okay.
like I don't know that that's the case,
Seems
but
too
the timing
coincidental.
was incredibly close
Right.
for that to not be suspicious. And like this week, I said nasty things about 2 other PBMs who I fully expect to send me an audit next week.
Wow.
Like,
Wow.
so those are methods of trying to silence people, but like.
Yeah.
I feel very confident that everything that I do is squeaky clean by the books in the pharmacy. And so I think that being an honest operator means that I have the ability to speak out and not be concerned that like business is going to suffer because of me speaking out. It will be annoying. I will have to deal with paperwork that is on my lap because of my speaking out.
Right.
But I don't believe that they'll find anything. Like, bring it on.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So, Benjamin, let's talk about a couple of things I want to cover. You spoke to me about the 39 attorneys general, but before we go there, what should the average employer pay per member? Means not only employees but their dependents, per person, per month or year. What should be the average spend in the country?
Sure. I mean, you can look this up. The Department of Health and Human Services does a ton of work to publish what are called the personal health care expenditures, which is a listing of just how much money was spent in every category of healthcare on a per person basis in the entire country. Right.
Okay.
And I think that it would be probably a good tactic by any kind of benefits brokers to just benchmark all of their employers against that, because it is just the national average for what do you spend for hospital care, what do you spend for outpatient prescription drugs, what do you spend for all of this. Anyway, that all to say, when I look at the most recent results, and then inflate them a little bit for bringing us forward to 2025, I come up with a figure of about $1,500 per member per month. Sorry, per year.
Per year.
Per member per year. So $1,500 per member per year is what the average is nationally. That's including Medicare beneficiaries who almost certainly spend more than employers,
because they're older population. Obviously, they have
right?
more prescriptions.
I believe that this figure, understood properly, is net of rebates. So it's not going to be your upfront spending. It's going to be net of all discounts and rebates. You should be somewhere in that range of $1,500 per member per year. That's my best understanding. I could be wrong about this. I could be misinterpreting those statistics,
Right.
but that's my understanding of what that figure represents. And
Okay. So $125 per month per person. And the average employer's population, if an employer has 100 employees, there used to be a time that meant there are 280 members. Okay. That has shrunk, especially since the ACA passed. I think the average now is 1.9. So for 100 employees, there are 190 members. So if we use simple math, simple math, that 1,500 becomes at most $3,000 per employee per year.
right.
Okay. Wow. That is high, but I've heard employers spending way more than that.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with like that's what the average is, but especially smaller plans, on the range of 50 to several hundred,
Sure.
you can have dramatic variability, right?
Absolutely.
Because
one high cost drug
drug
is going to blow
costs
the
are
average.
so concentrated in just a few items that if you get one hemophiliac or one rheumatoid arthritis or one patient or one plan member develops cancer, those costs can balloon enormously.
Wow.
Insurance is based on the law of large numbers. That's what you would get if you had that 1,500 is probably what you would get if you had like a Medicare for all type of system. That's what Medicare would spend on an overall basis. But that's not how our current system works. So you may be unlucky and have adverse selection. You may be very lucky and you may have much lower costs than that. But that's my understanding of where the
so
average should be.
$1,500 is the benchmark. So let's talk a little bit about let's talk for just a second about this new thing with the attorneys general that was filed just yesterday?
Yeah.
April 14th, sorry.
Right. April 14th. Yeah. So I have said for years that we need to have a so-called Glass-Steagall for healthcare. Glass-Steagall's a 1930s era law that said that certain types of banking have to be separate companies. You cannot be an investment banker and a community banker at the same time.
Makes sense.
It's since been repealed, but it was a structural bill that said just doing these two kinds of business in the same company is illegal.
The fox guarding the hen house.
Yeah. And so in healthcare, to me, there are just some commonly owned companies that should not exist. Because the opportunities to screw over everybody else is just there are too many. From my perspective, you should not be able to be a third-party administrator insurer where your job is to manage other people's money and reduce costs of care and also be a provider of services. So you shouldn't be a physician and an insurer. You shouldn't be a pharmacy and a pharmacy benefit manager. Those simply should not exist. Late last year, in December, Elizabeth Warren and Josh Hawley introduced a bill called the Patients Before Monopolies Act that would prohibit pharmacy benefit managers and pharmacies from being under the same parent company. A great name, by the way, the PBM Act for preventing PBMs from owning pharmacies. Anyway, so that was sort of just viewed as this like messaging bill. It's just like, we think this is bad, whatever. But since December, 5 states have introduced similar legislation. Arkansas passed that legislation last year, and it's currently sitting on Governor Huckabee's desk, awaiting signature, a bill called House Bill 1150 that would prohibit pharmacy benefit managers from owning PBMs. And then yesterday, 39 state attorneys general sent a joint letter to Congress saying, please pass a bill that would prevent pharmacy benefit managers from owning pharmacies this is just a corrupt arrangement and shouldn't exist. Which is, like, for a policy that on the national scale basically rolled out of bed 4 months ago, that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. And 39, Benjamin, that's truly bipartisan.
Right.
You know, there have got to be states on the left and the right saying the same thing to have that many people.
Right. I mean, California's on there, Arkansas's on there, Missouri's on there, Utah's on there. Like,
Wow.
you've got the bluest state and you've got 3 very red states in there, right? This isn't a partisan issue.
Right.
It's simply a matter of what's right and what's wrong, what's corrupt and what's not. And so this is simply an argument that the ability to be on both sides of the transaction shouldn't be allowed.
I agree.
So
Makes a lot of sense. And the AMA has also come out with some rules, which I'm going to be speaking to the former head of CMS in a couple of weeks. That he's going to speak about that, Don Berwick, because that's a big issue. Now, one more thing I wanted to cover, because we're getting close to the end, is you talked to me about New Jersey, the state of New Jersey, and them talking about their benefits plan.
Right.
Something about saving 25, then 100 million, and then even more.
Right. So this is a story that I heard from the director of a group called America's Agenda. It's a union-backed group. His name's Mark Bloom. He talked about this. This was so the state of New Jersey was going back and forth on their budget. This is 5, 6, 7 years ago now. So this is a while ago. Imagine doing this today. With prices being higher. Anyway, they were going back and forth saying, man, we've got to cut the public employees' benefits, we've got to cut their pay, or we've got to raise taxes. These are our choices. And so this gentleman, Mark Bloom, had come up with this concept that we're going to just change the pharmacy benefit for the state employees plan. And specifically, we're going to write our own contract that says this is what we want, and then we're going to ask for a bid on, can you administer this contract that we, the state, wrote?
So the changes weren't higher copays, less drugs.
No, it's the change here is simply who writes the contract and then going to bid with a defined contract with tight definitions of what is brand, what is generic, what's specialty, whatever. Okay. But they wrote the contract themselves and then went to bid. And their administrator at the time was Express Scripts. Express Scripts was like, no, don't go to bid. Hey, we looked at our modeling for you, and we were able to find $25 million of savings for the plan. So just
$25 million.
Right, that's a lot of money.
Wow,
right?
That is a lot of money.
I mean, this is a big plan, so it's not like a huge amount of money relative to the plan, but that's enough to like catch the state legislature's attention. And so they're like, look, don't go to bid, don't do this, just trust us. We found you $25 million. And the state's like, oh, well, maybe we should just go with that. That's a lot of money. But then the state decided to forge ahead. And a few months later, Express Scripts came back to the state and said, hey, we looked at things again. We found $100 million of savings. Just stick with us, trust us. It'll be fine. Here's like, we've looked at things and like, we found you $100 million.
4 times as much, up from 25 to 100 million.
Right.
Wow.
And the state's like, man, this sounds like such a good deal. But the people that were advocating for this, including Mr. Bloom, said, no, we got to forge ahead. It'll be great. Like, let's just do this. And so the state decided to proceed with the process that they had designed, and they went to bid. The PBM that won the bid from the state was OptumRx, and they came in literally $1 billion per year less than the Express Scripts baseline.
Billion with a B.
With
$1 billion. Wow.
Like, that is such an enormous amount of money.
That is a huge amount of money, Benjamin. That's huge.
And so, like, this to me, like, that story, you should absolutely talk to Mr. Bloom and to the folks at America's Agenda about their process, and they've since found more by simply not only writing the contract, but then designing analytics tools to audit against the contract that they signed to make sure that Optum is in fact delivering on what they promised in the contract while the contract is ongoing, not just after the fact.
That is so amazing. Wow.
And they found another like 500 million from that.
Wow. Wow, that is amazing. And that's just by writing your own contract. So the moral of the story is read the contract that you're signing and ask for amendments and or write your own contract and have them bid against that.
Yes.
Wow,
Yes.
that's amazing. Same drugs, same
Right.
copays, same
Right.
pharmacies. Wow, that
Yeah.
is incredible. Well, Benjamin, listen, this has been a pleasure to speak to you. We're coming up against the end. How do
Yes.
people reach you if they want to talk to you a little bit more? How can they reach you?
Sure. So my website for my company is apexpharmacyconsulting.com. And my email is just benjamin@apexpharmacyconsulting.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, find me on Facebook probably, but Benjamin Jolley. Yeah, that's me.
Okay, excellent. And we'll post that in the show notes as well. Benjamin, thanks for being with us. And this is another episode of The Benefit Whisper. If you want to reach us, you can contact us at thebenefitwhisper.com. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow, or call us at 832-940, or email me at ralph@thebenefitwhisper.com. Thank you again for being here today, and another episode coming very soon. We'll get even deeper into the weeds. Thank you, Benjamin, for being with us.
Thank you for listening to the Benefit Whisper podcast. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Looking to reach out? Visit our website at www.thebenefitwhisperer.com or give us a call at 832-924-3330. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the Benefit Whisper. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.